The vaccine plan is coming together, and it can't come soon enough as COVID cases continue to surge. Wall Street wrapping up its best month in years, and the monolith that went missing is now back halfway around the world. Here's what you need to know. Good morning. This is Cheddar's Need2Know podcast for Tuesday, December 1st. I'm Jill Wagner with Carlo Versano. It's December, Carlo. I can't believe it.
What a year November was, huh? And think about the last 30 days for a second. We had the biggest turnout. We had a presidential election, if you can believe it. That was less than a month ago. Had the biggest turnout in history. A historic attempt to overturn the results. We got three promising vaccine results. The record hurricane season from this year finally over as of yesterday. I feel like, Jill, in like high school history classes, like when Alex is in high school, like her history teachers are going to specialize in like chunks of 2020. Like, oh yeah, 11th grade history, my teacher is lecturing on the 6-week period between in 2020 when the president was hospitalized with coronavirus and when the 30th hurricane formed. He told us for the test, don't forget to study up on the period when the election was contested. It's like, that's how much news there is.
It's incredible. It feels like it was a different lifetime that the president, that when he was sick with COVID.
Yeah,
that wasn't that long ago.
Yeah, I know. Wow.
Today's also Giving Tuesday, which is a great excuse to give to charity, especially this year. Many are hurting.
Yep,
Even
absolutely.
more so than they normally are. All right, let's get to the news. The U.S. now reporting more than 1 million new coronavirus cases and 10,000 deaths a week. Hospitalizations are approaching the 100,000 milestone. Californians are preparing for the possibility of a full stay-at-home order in the coming days as ICU beds in the state fill up. New York hospitalizations are at a level not seen since May. Governor Cuomo saying they're now wants hospitals to prep for shortages of personnel, calling on retired nurses and doctors. There is some hope on the horizon, though, Carlo, in terms of vaccines. But the fact is, we're in dire shape right now, and it's only going to get worse before it gets better, given that we won't even see the effects of the Thanksgiving holiday for another couple of weeks. Dr. Fauci said it's a surge upon a surge. I know we said it yesterday, but I just think that's a really appropriate way to look at it.
Yeah, I agree with you. Some epidemiologists that I've been reading predicting that the death toll could be, we could basically double the 250,000 figure that we surpassed last week, which would mean 500,000 dead Americans by the spring, which is just really inconceivable. And hard to imagine if you told us we'd be here back in the spring, I think. There's a little bit more COVID news. Dr. Scott Atlas, he's the controversial White House pandemic advisor who was known for questioning masks and espousing some other conspiracy theories. He has resigned. He's no longer running the show for the White House task force. Dr. Fauci appears to be back in at least some kind of control. He was at the White House this week. He's been all over TV, including on Cheddar. We'll talk about that in a second. So I think, we're Fauci fans. I think it's promising to see him at least appearing to have some sense of, of political control.
Dr. Fauci actually came on Cheddar yesterday, and he was talking about the early plans for vaccine distribution. So once the doses arrive in each state, it's actually going to be up to the governors and local health officials to figure out who gets them first. Herd immunity, according to Fauci, is conceivable by May, but that is only if everyone decides that they want to get vaccinated. Moderna has now applied for emergency authorization for its vaccine, which has shown a stunning 100% efficacy in preventing severe cases of the disease. So if it's authorized, the first shots could be administered before Christmas. I'm worried about the second shots, though, because the vaccine's not going to work until you get both.
Right.
And that the logistics, it just doubles the issue, right? So you need 600 million doses, not 300 million doses.
Do we know what the time period?
I think it's 3 weeks.
3 weeks between? Okay, right.
We were talking the other day, Carlo, about whether you could decide which vaccine you can get. You know, like if you could pick, oh, I want the Moderna or the Pfizer. So the answer is no, especially in the beginning where it's just going to be you take what they give you. But it is possible that Pfizer's, which needs to be stored at that negative 94 degrees, that's probably going to go to the bigger cities like New York, because the distribution will be a lot easier and you don't need to travel quite as far. And that the Moderna vaccine will go to more rural areas.
Yeah, I think that probably makes sense, right? I'm worried a little bit about the distribution. I'm not so worried about. There's a lot going on. There are a lot of people out there saying, like, there's going to be this issue of people not getting vaccinated. Worried about this shot being rushed. I feel like that's a little bit overblown. I mean, I could be wrong, but my gut tells me that I think once the FDA signs off on these drugs, once people start actually getting these shots in their arms and they're not like dropping dead or turning into zombies, I think people are going to see that this stuff works, and this is a huge medical advancement, and I think there's going to be a rush to get these shots, and we're going to get to herd immunity by the spring. I really think so. But my bigger concern, like I said, is the distribution, is getting these into the hands of people who need them. But look, this is where it's going to pay to have a competent governor. They are essentially running the show now. This is sort of by design by the federal government. It's going to be up to them to make sure that the distribution is equitable. I think we probably all agree, Jill, that healthcare workers should get this shot first, and then probably essential workers, people who work in grocery stores, pharmacies, things of that nature. But then it gets a little bit interesting, right? Then who gets it? People with underlying conditions. But what does that mean? Is it any condition? Elderly people, but like, how is there like an age cutoff? What happens when we inevitably hear stories about, rich or famous people who try to cut the line? I think that will almost assuredly happen and will lead to some levels of outrage. All of this stuff is, these are sort of like good problems to have, I think. But I think we should just be prepared that these are the questions that we're going to have to be asking ourselves in these next few months.
Yeah, my advice to influencers and Kim Kardashian and everyone else,
yes.
Don't post the picture of yourself getting the vaccine in January when you're supposed to be getting it in May, and there's like an 85-year-old with an underlying health condition that can't get it.
I think that's a great prediction, actually. There is no question that will happen. There will be some picture of some influencer at the doctor's office or at CVS getting the shot.
Thank you, Dr. Miller. Like some ridiculous caption with no mask on. It's just, I totally agree. Okay, so let's talk a little politics. Wisconsin and Arizona have certified their votes as expected, affirming President-elect Biden's win in those crucial states. President Trump continuing to fundraise over his attempt to overturn the results. He raised about $170 million since Election Day to fight the results. So the vast majority of that is going to go into his new PAC. It's going to fund future political ambitions, if you read the fine print. Meanwhile, Congress back in D.C. for a short lame duck session. Carlo, I am on all of the email lists of the president. I'm on the Democratic email lists. And first of all, I'm like, every time I get them, I'm like, I can't believe my inbox is still being flooded with these emails, but it's an onslaught. It doesn't stop. I mean, I could probably get 3 or 4 a day from Lara Trump, from Eric Trump, from everyone else saying, we need to do this, blah, blah, blah. And it's crazy.
It's so funny you say that. My brother and I were talking about this over Thanksgiving, because we were just saying, like, what is the return on investment for those emails? Are there people like there's at some point when you're getting 20 or 30 of them a day, it's like, are there people out there who deleted the first 19 emails from President Trump saying he needs their donation, but the 20th was the one that put them over the edge? I don't really understand that political strategy, especially because those email lists are extremely valuable. Right, you don't want people unsubscribing from those. Like those go to the DNC and the RNC. So I don't know. I took myself off of both of them after the Election Day because I just couldn't handle it anymore. But Jill, you did mention.
I get them from Democrats, by the way, too, especially with the Georgia runoff. I'm getting from John Ossoff like 2 a day. He's one of the candidates who's running for the Senate in Georgia on the Democratic side.
Again, who are these people that are like, okay, today's the day? I don't know. Anyway, it must work or they wouldn't do it, right? I'm not a political strategist. What do I know? Anyway, Jill, you talked about Congress coming back. Lawmakers have two goals in this short lame duck session. One of them is in reach. The first goal is to pass a spending bill by December 11th to prevent a potential government shutdown. That is in reach. Their second goal is to agree on a new stimulus package. That is not in reach. I think there's virtually no chance of that happening before Inauguration Day. But I mean, I think everybody agrees that the prospects of a government shutdown right now are beyond the pale, even for this cast of useless politicians that we have in Washington.
Over on Wall Street, investors just wrapped up a historically strong month. The Dow had its best month since 1987. The market ended November, though, on a bit of a down note. It still notched its biggest monthly gains in nearly 34 years. The Dow, the S&P, the NASDAQ each up more than 10% for the month, mostly thanks to some of the positive vaccine developments that we've been getting.
Yeah, I think that's almost all of it, right? I don't know what else it would be. President Trump has said that the stock market was going to crash if he wasn't reelected. That is clearly not coming to fruition, at least not right now. But I guess we'll see what the end of the year brings. You know this better than me. The end of the year is typically a good time for the markets, or
yes, the time between between Thanksgiving and Christmas. It's called a Santa Claus rally. That's kind of like the cute name for it, and usually markets do well right before the holidays. And I interviewed an analyst yesterday who thinks that's going to continue this year as well. I think the wild card here, so there's a few things that are now settled, right? Like we know that there's some good vaccine data. We know the election results are,
right.
There's not uncertainty surrounding the election. The wild card is if the Senate does flip for the Democrats. So if the Democrats do pick up those 2 seats in Georgia, Wall Street will not like that because that they like, potentially a Democratic president and then at least some sort of balance, the Republicans controlling the Senate. So that's kind of the thing that could tank the markets a bit.
I read, where was it? I read something yesterday about how Democratic donors, or Wall Street Democratic donors, are not getting involved in the Georgia Senate races for that exact reason.
I do want to mention a story now that has the science world talking. The artificial intelligence group DeepMind has solved a problem that has confounded biologists for 50 years. DeepMind created this algorithm. It's called AlphaFold. That's been able to accurately predict how proteins are formed. It's the first time an AI has successfully answered a major riddle of science. Researchers have been able to map the structure of proteins for a while, but the process is very expensive and takes years. AlphaFold does it in a couple of days. So Carlo, this is a story that I know you are probably all about. So tell us,
I am.
Why, practically speaking, what does this mean? Why should we care? Walk us through it.
Yeah, so I mean, I am fascinated by all things artificial intelligence. So if you're not, I appreciate that. But bear with me for a second. So the breakthrough here, the reason why this is important, it has implications for everything from understanding disease to creating designer vaccines for for diseases we don't even know about yet, right? The next coronavirus, for instance, to doing things like build.
I can't even.
Stop. Seriously, there's going to be another coronavirus. Sorry to break it to you, folks. COVID-20 or whatever. It's one day it'll happen. It also does, this has potential to do things like build proteins that can break down waste, which could be good for climate change, for the environment. Just remember from high school biology, right? Proteins are made of amino acids, and when they combine, they make the building blocks of life. So when you can see and predict how proteins are made, the possibilities are really endless. But the big deal here is for the artificial intelligence, right? For years, we've heard about these programs beating computer games, beating human chess players. But the promise of AI has always been that those were just sort of like the previews for the big show. The actual use was going to be solving these really huge, complicated problems that we just can't do on our own, right? We just don't have the mental capacity for them, or at least do them efficiently. That's why this is a big breakthrough. So it's a little bit scary. I mean, I think artificial intelligence is a little bit scary when you think about it, but it's also probably going to be the biggest technology advancement of our lifetimes. So that's why I just think that, this is really cool, and it's just an important thing to keep in mind.
I watched recently The Imitation Game. It came out in 2014.
Oh, yeah, that was a great
It's about Alan Turing, where he was trying to crack the German Enigma code during World War II. And he had sort of created this machine that's like, was the first version of I guess a computer. And what you're saying reminds me of that. And I remember at the time, at least the way that they portrayed it in the film, it was a little bit frightening and no one really understood why this would be helpful. And they're like, no, we need to go back to the old school way of just trying to figure out this code by hand. And they actually cracked it, and it was a huge secret, but not many people know the story. But it credited for potentially allowing us to win World War II and beat the Nazis. But it kind of reminds me of, for whatever reason, when you were talking, it reminded me of that.
No, I think it's the same. It's those kinds of technology advancements that, I mean, the story about Alan Turing is just so sad because he was, I forget it now, but he was gay and he was basically ostracized from, even though he essentially won the war. But anyway, carry on.
Okay, on to sports. The NFL's mantra for the rest of the season might just be the show must go on, whatever the cost. The Steelers-Ravens game has now been postponed for the third time. Kickoff is scheduled for tomorrow at 3:40 p.m. Eastern on NBC, early enough that it won't interfere with NBC's broadcasting of the Rockefeller Center tree lighting. The Ravens will play it with around a dozen players on the COVID reserve list. The scheduling change will affect at least 2 Week 13 games with no bye weeks remaining. So there's only so many more changes that can logistically happen.
Yeah, this is really getting to, I don't know how they're running up against the clock here, Jill, but, the NFL is about money, right? It's a business. Lost games equal lost revenue. So they're going to figure out how to make them up, like playing the Steelers-Ravens game, which was supposed to be the big Thanksgiving game in the middle of the afternoon on a Wednesday. But the season is really starting to get unrecognizable. I mean, look, I think I said this the other day, but imagine if you're the Steelers, right? You're undefeated. You're having an historic season. Is anybody even going to remember, even if they win the Super Bowl? Or is this whole NFL season just going to have a huge asterisk on it? I don't know.
It's a question for all of these sports, right? I mean, and this is the issue with the Big Ten right now. There was no room for error. There were no bye weeks built in. In other news, Felicity Huffman has landed her first TV gig since becoming a convicted felon. The actress, who served 11 days in prison last year for her role in the college admissions scandal, is going to be starring as the unlikely owner of a minor league baseball team in a still unnamed comedy series that's been ordered by ABC.
Good for her. Deadline saying that she's actually getting offers from everyone, if you can believe that. She's been fielding offers ever since she got out of the can. Just remember that next time somebody complains about cancel culture, right? It's not, people don't really, do they actually get canceled or do they end up being okay? And I'm not knocking her. I'm all about second chances. So I say, get paid, girl. Good for you.
I'm excited for. I don't know if the cancel culture reference works for her because she's somebody who she was like a master class in what you do if this happens to you. She was remorseful. She did the time, unlike Lori Loughlin, who basically pushed and pushed. But by the way, Lori Loughlin and her husband both now behind bars. I'm curious what happens with Lori Loughlin's career. But Felicity Huffman is extremely talented. I mean, she is a really talented actress. You're going to want to watch an interview with her. Like, it's smart. If you're putting a show together, that's an actress you're going to want to watch, and you're going to want her to do all of the press tours because that's what you're going to, viewers are going to learn about it.
Lori Loughlin should have used her lawyers. I mean, like you said, she did it right. Take the heat, get it over with, do your time, get out, and get on with your life.
Okay, Carlo, this is a story I know you've been itching to talk about, so let's do it quickly. The Monolith, it is back, and it is in Romania, if you could believe it. So days after this large metal monolith first of all, was spotted in the Utah desert. It then vanished from the Utah desert. And then a similar or the same structure has now been spotted in northern Romania near the site of an ancient fortress in the northern part of the country. This three-sided metal structure appears nearly identical to the one that was found and then went missing in Utah. It has some apparently human-made carvings on its face. What do we think it is? Is Becky involved with this? This is your wife who's from Romania. That's the first thing I thought.
Yeah, me too. No, hopefully it's aliens. But I think the real answer is probably the most likely answer, which is it's some sort of artwork. It appears as though these monoliths, or this one monolith, is the work of this late sculptor named John McCracken. He was known for creating these big shiny metal structures. There's even one on display at a gallery here in New York City that looks almost identical to these ones. The art world thinks that he has something to do with this, even though he's been dead for 9 years. The story goes that when he was dying, he wanted his work to be placed in remote areas around the world to be discovered by people later, which I think is a pretty cool legacy. The one in Utah was reportedly put there back in 2016. People figured that out based on looking at old Google Earth satellite imagery, but they just found it recently because it was so remote. But so normally I'd say, I think it's probably like an art project, but this being 2020, maybe it really is the aliens. Who knows, right? Would it really would you really be that surprised?
This year, anything could happen. And I also think I don't think we're the only living beings out here, out there.
Oh, Jill, we should do a special podcast where we just, we just sort of opine on the nature of the universe.
Would anybody want to hear that?
I would.
All right, let's give it a whirl. If December gets weird enough, maybe we'll do it. All right, everyone, that's what you need to know for Tuesday, December 1st.
Bye, guys.